All right. Can we call the meeting to order, please? Rita, when you're ready, would you do a roll call, please?
I'm ready, and I'd be happy to. Mr. Doherty.
Here.
Vice Chairman Murphy.
Here.
Mrs. Smith. Here. Mr. Roche.
Here.
Chairman Smith.
Here. Thank you, Rita.
Let the record show that also present are Town Manager Dunham, Assistant Town Attorney Nazaro, and myself.
Thank you, Rita. We've all been given the minutes of the last meeting, which were quite extensive. I hope you've had a chance to read them. If so, could I have a motion to approve them as stated, or are there any corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Moved second. Moved and seconded, Rita?
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Murphy.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith. Yes. Mr. Roche.
Yes.
Chairman Smith.
Yes, thank you, Rita. Are there any additions, withdrawals, deferrals, arrangements to the agenda items that you have in front of you? They're all set, thank you. Under announcements, we see our next meeting is May 27th. I know that two of us are not going to be here on May 27th. If anybody else isn't going to be, would they let Rita know as soon as possible? And you see we've got a June and July meeting also. If you know where you're going to be, then it would help. I think we do have some items on the May 27th date. See if there's nothing else. I think we can move into the public hearing portion. Does anyone have any ex parte communication to declare?
I do.
Go ahead.
I spoke with my case on April of nothing concerning property.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. Rita, would you administer the oath to all those here who are going to speak today or think they may speak today? Would you please stand? Raise your right hand.
You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Will you make sure before you leave that Renee has your name? Thank you.
Excuse me, my attorney will be speaking and he's still outside.
Okay.
Okay. We can swear them in when the time comes. Okay, the first application today is submitted by Donald Day of Delray Awning on behalf of the Gulfstream Golf Club. Mr. Day, you want to please come up to the podium?
Okay, the club is proposing a new awning for the front dining terrace. I've been using for the dining terrace in the last couple of years. I have it covered full-time and for aspect of the dining. The colors net will be the same as it's on. There is a dining area on the south side of the club.
Right.
That's in there. So it's all matching what's there at the valley.
And for the record, I asked Kevin earlier, will the scalloping on the front edge be similar or identical to what we see on the other front awning on the building?
Yes, it'll be identical.
Okay.
Same pattern. Same color.
You have a sample of the fabric.
Anybody wants to see it? Everybody's seen this.
How long does an awning like this last?
It's 100 feet long.
Yeah.
Across there and projects out 23 feet.
But how long do you think this product will last before it has to be replaced? I'm just curious.
Fabrics basically are about 10 years before replacement, cleaning occasionally. And then basically the framework was pretty much lifetime, usually 30 years or so.
If you got a hurricane situation, did it just be removed, taken off?
We are planning to remove it in the event that a hurricane warning is issued.
Who approved the engineering for the project? The actual framework engineering? Do you do that, or does the city of Delray do that?
I have Frank Bernardo of Engineering Express. He's my engineer that stamps everything. Yeah.
Okay. And then Delray Beach will be required to issue a permit.
It'll meet the Florida building code.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments? If not, Malcolm, would you, consider making a motion?
I wonder if I can find the right paper. I'd like to make a motion to approve a level 2 architectural site plan based on a finding that the installation of a 100 feet long by 26 feet wide fabric patio awning over the front terrace of the club for outdoor dining that matches the colour and design of those awnings that are located around the other areas of the building meets the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. If no further discussion, Rita, please.
Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roche?
Yes.
And Chairman Smith?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. The second item is an application that, Bill Weechman will be representing the Hayes on a home, a new home to be erected on after they, tear down an existing or demolish an existing home. Bill, when you get settled, you can go ahead, please.
My name is Bill Weeks. I'm an architect. I represent the Hayes. The Hayes came to me with this project a while ago. And as you know, it's a series of 4 houses over on the B&T. And the nickname is called the Pizza Hut House. It's a really interesting roof design. And the Hayes intention is to downsize of this house and sell the house that they're in right now and move into this house in a year or so. And we really want to update the house. We looked at doing a new roof, new design, making the house more up to date, more concurrent with what's wanted in the town of Gulfstream as far as style goes. But we had a real problem in the fact that the house is 1.5 feet lower than the houses on either side. And in torrential rains, water comes down the hill, and then actually the biggest water problem is the water from the west, which flows into this property. And before we made a big investment on this house, we really wanted to make sure the drainage was going to work, so we weren't going to get flooded out. And so the intention here is to remove the only way to really do this is to raise the house up. And of course, there's an existing foundation. We really can't build on top of the old foundation. So let's build a new house on top of the old foundation. So the intention is to remove the house and build a new house on the exact same footprint to limit the impact. The impact is very, no different than what it is now. And bring the house up design-wise to what Gulfstream really wants in the design of their houses. And so we're simply going to build on the same footprint, build a Bermuda-style cottage for any intents and purposes. We're just exactly the same footprint, no different whatsoever, except a better styled house. And we have to apply for a variance to do that. And I think we've met all the requirements for a variance. We're just trying to have the same, enjoy the property the same way our neighbors do. And I think it's a definite improvement for that area. I think all the neighbors all around, including the B&T and the neighbors on both sides and Barbara Whitaker, are all in favor of this happening because projects really aren't as attractive as they could be. So we're asking humbly for a variance to build a new house that complies with, style-wise, with what's really required of one of the town. Any questions?
The existing structure is non-conforming, correct?
Non-conforming from a zoning standpoint and also from a Florida buildings standpoint.
But, I mean, one of the things we have always are the 8 conditions to consider variance and forward. And number two is a choice of the applicant. Well, by number 2 on our list of conditions is the one that is a major hurdle to get over. Is the one about is it the choice of the applicant? But as we described, you essentially, if I understand it, we're getting swamped by the runoff from other properties.
That's correct.
Bill, will the, eave height kind of line up with the Levitt house and
Yes.
the neighbor, that's closely aligned with them? And the height of the roof also very similar?
Yes, maybe a little lower.
There's a sketch in here, maybe a little lower even than the Levitt house. Okay.
It doesn't have the grill work on the roof, which the other house does. It's actually very attractive.
Yeah, did everyone have a chance to read those 8 points that Malcolm was referencing about the application for variance? When I went through the 8 points, I think at least 7 out of the 8 of them are meaning yes, meaning that we can't blame the condition that the house is in, on the current owners. They didn't build the home there. You're really just asking, for an identical footprint, or is it gonna extend a little bit further to the street? Identical footprint, okay. Anybody else have any other questions of the design?
Handle the water drainage.
Oh, the new drainage is gonna be handled with exfiltration, and with exfiltration under the, underground, no swales. It's just not enough room for swale room, it's better to have a flat area.
And are you taking the foundation out and then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because the old foundation is gonna be 1.5 feet below the new foundation.
Right, I just didn't know if you were building, okay, yeah, gotcha, yeah.
Is it on City of Delray sewer? Does it tie in somehow to Delray?
No, there's a septic system that all 4 houses are tied to,
Where's that?
over by Barbara's house.
Is it really?
Wow.
Oh my, so there's a variance or there's easements and?
Yes, there is, there's access, there's actually a pump in front of this house.
There's a pump of some sort, okay.
Oh, my.
And all the neighbors are in favor, that's that.
Yes, they are, I think you might have, Rita, do you receive letters? from
Yeah,
them?
They had them in their packet.
I think it's a real plus for the area, I think we try to make that area into it.
I agree. We'll think we do too.
Yeah, we're all in favor.
Is there any other further discussion? If not, we have a motion, please.
Can I just clarify, there are 3 motions here, we need a motion for the demolition permit.
Yes.
Yes, just on that, okay, first of all, I'd like to make a motion to, approve the application for demolition permit to remove the structures on the property prepared for new construction.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Rita?
Mr. Dougherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Yes?
Mrs. Smith, Mr. Roche,
Yes.
and Chairman Smith.
Yes.
Furthermore, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of a variance from the provisions of section 71-4 to allow an 8 feet 1 inch modification to the side setback, a 7-foot modification to the front setback, and an 8-foot modification to the rear of the setback, and a variance from the provision of section 70-72 to allow a 146 square foot increase in the allowable FAR.
Okay.
Moved and seconded, Rita?
Mr. Dougherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Roche,
Yes.
and Chairman Smith.
Yes.
And finally, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval to permit the construction of a 2,647 square foot Gulfstream Bermuda single-story dwelling, the finished floor elevation of which will be increased to 9.53 NAVD, an increase of 1.5 feet to match that of the neighbouring dwellings and an attached garage.
I second that.
Moved and seconded, Rita, please?
Mr. Dougherty,
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith, Mr. Roche, Chairman Smith.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
There were several persons came in after the oath was administered.
Yes, okay.
Anybody that intends to speak and did not swear to the oath, please rise. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yeah, no.
We tried to get the ducks out.
Yeah. The sheep was always there.
Okay, the third item on the agenda today is a continuation of two prior architecture review board meetings, and as you know, I have a potential conflict of interest here, so I will be stepping aside, and Malcolm Murphy will handle the meeting during that part of the discussion. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. For the record, Malcolm Murphy officially taking over the chair of the meeting this morning. Good morning, everybody. Richard, do you have to administer the oath now?
Yes, my name is Ken Harrison.
Sorry, Mr. Rocket. Can I just make a note before we move forward? On the docket, it says continued from the public meeting held on 2/25. It's actually 3/25. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Rocket.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back. We're going to make a short presentation. When I say short, we're trying to make this short on our side. We have all our consultants here. We have, of course, we have the owners, Steve Benjamin, and who owns it with his wife, Heidi. We have our marine contractor, Arthur Tiedemann, who's present. We have our civil engineer, the eminent Bill Stoddard, our landscape architect, Chris Cavizas, and our specialty engineer for Seawall itself, Michael Faber. And we have our property manager, John Black. Now, none or all these people can speak today. It's up to the questions that you may have, as well as the members of the audience or the public that may have some questions. So what I'd like to do, if I may, is run through my presentation, go through it entirely, and then at the end of the presentation, answer any of your questions. Hopefully, all the questions and issues that were raised will be answered by this presentation. If it's not, we're ready to go to this one. Thank you. So, the Lemon Hill Waterfront Renovation is a older home on the site of numerous acres on top of the hill, looking over the beautiful canal. When my client first purchased this property, he knew he would have to repair the seawall. As everybody knows, the seawall is in poor condition, like almost all the seawalls along the canals of the town of Gulf Stream. It's a condition that people are facing over and over again in this town. It's an expensive project, and we think we brought in some technology that we believe is going to be used widely in Gulf Stream. Just a quick overview. We have the canal, and we have Lemon Hill. We have the new waterfront enhancement project. There's a close-up of the waterfront expansion. And here's a close-up of the enhancement of the northwest corner, the west entrance, which is the service entrance. The existing conditions of seawall are undisputed. It needs to be replaced. We had to install temporary pilings to reinforce it. Our marine contractor did that work to ensure that we would be safe and it would be secure until we complete our construction. The solution, and this is a solution I think a lot of people are going to be looking at, is the Truline seawall system, which is essentially a polyvinyl system. And you look over here, these are the polyvinyl shell that's placed in the ground, deep into the ground, and then rebar and concrete is poured into it. Now, this vinyl U-channel form system is being recognized, and it's been used for many years, and now it's being applied here in South Florida. These are details concerning the engineering of it, and of course, if you have any questions concerning that, we can go over it later. The existing conditions, I just want to reflect. This is the expansive backyard of Lemon Hill. And if you look down the yard, you then see the canal and the seawall that will have to be replaced. We're essentially trading land or exchanging land for water. Contrary to most people where they take swamps and fill it with land, we're doing the opposite and creating water. So, is there a way of reducing the size of this image a little bit? Would one of the clerks help me? Because this is
I don't believe
a
you
little
can
bit
since it's a
larger.
PDF.
Oh, okay. It's not possible to. Just one, please. That's it. That's too small. A little bit back up. One more. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. So we have developed a site plan, and there is an issue, and somebody raised the issue how we're dealing with stormwater control. In fact, we do have stormwater control plan. It's really not required in residential buildings, residential uses, but we are assuring that after we move this land, that we will have another area, an elevation and contouring of the area to assure that the water that will float on will be equivalent to the area that would have been the area where the water expansion is occurring. So it assures that there will be no increase in stormwater runoff from the property. Here's another close-up with more details and dimensioning of the expansion. The yellow is the old outline, the blue is the new, another perspective. So let's take a look at what we're going to have at the end of the project. The western elevation, we're going to develop the Truline seawall, which is a very, very clean look. And then we're going to have the seawall, and we're going to have a retention wall, one level at the end of the top of the seawall. And then because of the contour of the hill, we'll have a second retaining wall in the back, and we're going to be landscaping all this area right here. And what we will be docking on the site is a 64 Beecham, which is a handmade wooden boat. It's made in Turkey. It's been fully restored by the Benjamins. And as you can see, it's a beautiful motor yacht, classic. Here's another elevation that was a rendering by engineer Stoddard, showing the system and how we're going to have, here's the water, here's our minimalist dock, our landscaping, and then the retention wall back here. We're also going to have on the north side a lift. It's called a minimal profile boat lift. Actually, the name of the company actually gives the model no profile boat lift. So it has a little ledge on the edge of the seawall and then runs along the edge of the seawall so it can lift up tender. And we plan to have a 29-foot tender. By the way, we have worked with our neighbors, and Mr. Barton had some questions. We worked through all the details with him about the layout of the expansion. In fact, his attorney, Mr. Murphy's here, and he may answer your questions. You may want to make a short presentation, but all these details have been worked out with him, and we have become friends. At least Mr. Murphy and I have become friends over this thing, and I'm looking forward to Mr. Barton and Mr. Benjamin and the Benjamins and the Bartons getting together and enjoying the fact that they're neighbors and friends. So let's look at this was a concern raised by the Morrises, and they were looking at the issue of when we removed the exotic vines, intrusive vines, it opened up some gaps in our wall, in our landscape screening. So at the end of the project, we are going to replant all mostly natural and Florida species plants along the edge and trees in order to fill it up. So essentially, our property will be screened in its entirety. So that's before, and this is what it'll look like after. So let's talk about construction, because that's a concern that everybody, a legitimate concern. The main vehicle going in and out, besides the workers' vehicles, will be the dump truck that are excavated. It's approximately 10 feet high, and that will be the vehicle of choice. We will have this escalator low boy that will come in at the beginning of the project and leave at the end. We doubt if it's going to go in more than once and leave more than once, but it's possible, but this is the maximum. This is 12 and a half feet high. It's lower than or it's about the same size as a fire truck or garbage truck. Now, let's talk about how we're handling the traffic. The Morrises were concerned about all the trucks coming down and all the workers' cars coming down the roadway and coming into our service entrance. So we decided we would have the engineer explore using our front entrance going around our formal plaza and courtyard and through the property, and then removing some of the columns we have in the driveway if we need to, if the trucks are too large, and then come back over here, do a traffic circle, and come back and loop back and come out the same way from the entryway, which is only a couple hundred yards from the A1A, making minimal impact. And we did it. It's going to tear up our driveway, it's going to tear up our courtyard, but we have decided, as you can see here, that that's going to be the primary construction path. Now, we can't say that there will be no cars, there might be no trucks or anything coming through, but the only one we see is a low boy excavator coming through that one time to come in and then to come out. And we've been assured by Mr. Tiedemann that he would walk the site to assure that there are no new branches that would obstruct the truck in any way. In fact, and we'll go through this a little bit later, but we actually went through the site with a 14-foot high pole to see clearance, and there is nothing below 12 and a half to 13 and a half, nothing that would interfere with the trucks that we anticipate. So the construction site plan, which we already went through the route coming through our east entrance, through our formal courtyard, and now out. We've also created the parking area for the workers' cars and trucks, and also the place where we're going to load and unload any type of construction material. But there's more insight in this plan. If you look at the solid yellow line, yellowish orange line right here, and the solid yellow lines right here, we are going to be putting a fence, a privacy fence with a screen along so our neighbors will not see the construction. We also, to protect against water pollution, we're going to be building a silt fence along the edge. That's a solid blue line to assure that there will not be the silt going into the water. Mr. Tiedemann feels very comfortable he'll be able to carry out that duty. So we have construction pollution control, and this is very important for everybody, my client as well as everybody else. Excuse me. We have visual pollution for creating the privacy fence. The water pollution is going to be protected as with respect to the silt fence. We're going to prevent the air pollution, the dust management by watering down any dirt. And you have to realize most of the excavation, the soil will be wet already, so there will be minimal dust, but if there's any dry, we will be watering it down as part of the practice. And finally, we're going to have sediment control by putting these sediment control racks at the entryway to scrape the mud and dirt off the tires as they leave the property. So we're doing everything we can to have the least intrusive project. Mr. Kabiza is here, but we have this wonderful landscaping plan. We've already talked about the northwest side. We're adding additional trees on the west side and over here. In fact, we're adding, I believe, 24 additional trees. In fact, we're having 8 new trees for every tree that we lose. Every major tree that we lose. And here's the existing landscaping. This just went out. I hope I didn't.
I always do.
Okay.
Okay, good. Looks good. Thank you. So we have a tree assessment from our arborists, and they looked at the three specimen trees, or what appear to be specimen trees, and those report clearly shows those trees are in very poor condition. There's a few pictures. And finally, of course, we went through the formal tree survey process, and we submitted the survey. There were questions asked last time about whether or not we had submitted to the DEP as well as the Army Corps. We have submitted to DEP. We have our application. Our application was recognized by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. They are processing that application. They've also indicated that what the Army Corps of Engineers would sometimes review, it's also done by the Department of Environmental Protection under agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers. So it appears we will not actually have to submit a formal separate application to the Army Corps. Finally, we were measuring clearances along Hidden Harbor Drive. You can see the canopy is quite a bit higher than this 10-foot high truck. And there we have John Gudlock, our property manager, going around and walking down this pole. He said, I do look a little bit funny, and I said, I can't do anything about that. But he was able to assure that we would not have interference at trucks taller than 13 feet high. So that's basically our presentation, and I'm ready to answer questions, and I have all my consultants here to discuss it with you.
Thank you, Stan. Public comment? What?
I'll sit down,
Yes, thank you,
and
Rob.
I'll be available to answer questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I see that Mr. Smith has, Jennifer Morris, 24 South Hidden Harbor, packets. Are we gonna have packets of all of this information?
This, the
Yeah.
presentation.
I've been on the website for the last week or so.
Okay, so I have to print it out.
We can give you a copy.
We are concerned, there's 4 properties involved with this project, Mr. Smith, Mr. Barton, Lemon Hill, and the sanctuary. And I would like to see, legal surveys of those, at least 3 of those properties. I don't know if Mr. Barton's is quite necessary, but this is a very complicated project. And when I came to see the paperwork, I only saw a Xerox of a boundary survey. We contend that the, boundary between the sanctuary is not officially known because we've been told that there is no survey of the sanctuary. So I think that's very important to understand. We're dealing with the water, the wall, the conditions of the wall, extending this waterway, and we don't really know the legal boundary line. So I brought a copy of our title survey, and I think this is what the other landowners should be providing to the town. This is a little poor condition it's provided, Hurricane Sandy. But we contend that the property lines between the sanctuary and Lemon Hill are not clearly defined, and we would like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask the town, would that be on record normally anyway for every property in the town, the land survey that's carried out? I know we had one when we bought our property.
Correct, but, our town clerk, researched and, looked for a survey for the bird sanctuary. As you know, that was given to the town.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I don't think we've been able to find an actual boundary survey of that.
So we have it for these properties which are owned, I'm not going to say which the part is, but it's the bird sanctuary that's the issue. Is that okay?
Taylor, you explain that, your research for it.
Yes, I looked through the records and, we have, a deed for it, but there was no survey attached to the deed. Now, we do have a survey of the property that's being considered for development. We do have that, which is what she saw.
No, that was just a boundary survey at Xerox. That was not an official legal copy, and it was not a title survey. As far as I'm concerned, it is totally inadequate.
So,
Well, it was stamped. And of course, when they file for a building permit, then they will have.
so that will be a condition, anyway, what you're asking for, if I understand, Mrs. Morris, is
Yes, we
if this
submitted
moves
that.
forward, they would have to
We submitted
provide
another one
that
if you
correct stamp version that is zero,
You what?
copy, whatever.
We can submit another one right now if you want us to.
Sorry, Mr. Roberts.
One's in the record, we believe.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, it's in the record.
Okay. So just to clarify, so we address that point that was raised in the public arena. There is a copy, but Mrs. Morris, your concern is that it didn't certify authentic copy.
Well, it's also been, a boundary survey is not a legal title survey. But it's also been determined that the bird sanctuary does not have a survey, and we contend that that needs to be surveyed. Because we contend that the property line between Lemon Hill and the sanctuary is not legally known.
Mhm.
The only, from what I'm seeing on these drawings, the drawing that we got, just is all we have, there's the only concrete monument found is near the proposed construction entrance, and then there's a southwest corner. So this plat line 7 is the only legal property line that I see on any drawing. Because the fence doesn't say anything about property lines, doesn't say anything about plat lines, it just says existing fence. So from what I'm seeing, the only legal known property line is, it goes diagonally this way. And until we see a complete survey, I contend that that's the property line.
So this appears to be purely administrative, stroke legal aspect. How do we address that in terms of moving forward? Does it have to be resolved now, or if this moves forward, could it be a condition for next meeting? Just so to address that point,
We can easily get a survey done of the property. It's just the timing. I don't know how soon our surveyors would be able to get out there, what the turnaround would be. I don't see that as an issue necessarily, but if it shows that there's something being done to property that's owned by the town as part of the application, we could have the town commission put some sort of a condition on there that, you know, as long as the survey that comes back that the town is performing, you know, confirms the boundary survey done by the applicant.
Yeah. And that addresses the administrative process. And you can ask the board comments. Please.
Well, I thought the presentation was excellent, extremely informative for me. I spent an hour at the site a couple months ago, and I thought some of the concessions with the traffic was, I thought very nice and cooperative. I liked seeing the UPS truck and the fire truck and all that stuff, the waste management, you know, canopy. I like the fencing, I like the pollution control. I thought that this packet with all this stuff was excellent. Right.
Yeah, I'd like to just, sorry. No, it's okay.
Well, I just have two questions. One about, the seawall, how is it different from what usually is, you know, you use? And the other thing is just really go into the landscape that's going on. I know it's part of the business. I'm
I know,
sorry.
we're all having struggle.
The seawall, how is it any different than something that we use other than, oh, okay, there it is. And my other question is about the landscape.
Perhaps Arthur Tiedemann should address that question.
Arthur,
So it's 2021, and this is the future of seawalls, right? The original iteration of seawalls were coral stacked on top of each other with mortar cement. Then, you know, what you see today, what just about everyone has, is your cast in place concrete seawall, which is used with a king pile, and then panels are installed in front, and then you tie an integrated structural cap to it. But what that leaves is concrete degrades over time. The steel is, it's all within the water. And where the panels join, it leaves a gap. So they tend to leak, they tend to fail there. You get water erosion, you get voids behind it. And the typical installation, we use like a 5,000-pound drop hammer to hammer those pre-stressed concrete piles in, and from day one, they see a lot of stress getting hammered by a 5,000-pound hammer. Well, this new unique system, if we could go back to slide, I think it was one of maybe the 10th slide or something like that.
Okay, I'll get it right back up.
Excellent. So again, with the standard concrete seawall, the king piles are driven in very deep and have good penetration, but the panels, we usually only dig those in a couple feet into the dirt, and they just lay there and rest there. So sometimes you get soil that goes up and underneath, and you see voids that happen. And so with this system, each one of these is a U-shaped panel like this, and then we connect each one subsequently, right? So you're forming each one goes like this. I couldn't bring in a 20-foot panel, I'm glad. So you interlock each one, and you achieve penetration deep into the earth. So typical is 50% penetration, 50% out of the mud. So from the mud line, you have 50% up, 50% in. And then from there, you excavate the material that's inside of the, so you would say, here's the mud line right here, okay? And this mud would still be in here. We extract that mud, and then we drop in a steel rod. On the Benjamin's property specifically, it's very hard. So we're going to use a pin rod to dowel into the hard rock. And that gets your underpinning capabilities to where the bottom of the panel won't kick out. And then at the top, and we put a structural piece of steel in there and then completely fill it with cement. So it is still a cast-in-place concrete wall, but the form is also a very useful component. You have a 1/4 inch of vinyl, which God himself hasn't figured out how to get rid of. Protecting that concrete for, in my eyes, it's a 75-year rated system. And I sat and have looked at it in many different ways to figure out how to do it better, and these guys have really figured it out. It is a very robust system that'll last for a very long time, and you don't have any batter piles that are leaning in, points of failure. And at the top, we use these galvanized helical deadman anchors, in this case specifically, so we don't disturb all this earth, and the site restoration can be, left down, and then we form and pour a concrete cap. And specifically for the Benjamin project, we're using basalt rebar. So basalt rebar is a non-ferrous rebar, so it's we're trying to get away from steel. Steel rusts, it corrodes, and it does exactly, you saw the pictures before, that's the reason we're getting away from it. So basalt is a non-ferrous component that has the tensile strength is 5 times greater than standard steel, and it doesn't rust. So we are, everywhere we can use this product, we're using it, because it lasts longer. It's slightly more expensive, but the return, and if you're at a point of needing a new seawall, it's a large investment, so spending a little bit more and getting a component that will last and has very little weak points in it is the advantage over a traditional seawall. We virtually have gotten away from doing standard cast-in-place concrete walls, unless it's a project that's specifically designed and is being bid that way.
Is this considered to be the cutting edge of seawall construction at this,
Yes.
at this point in time?
Correct. So 10, 20, 30 years from now, you're going to see a lot more of this. It is, it's a growing thing. They've been around for a while, but it's starting to be adopted and taken on. There's a few more steps into it than, like a standard vinyl wall or a cast in place wall, but it's just a much better system. The equipment that we use, the capital expense of that equipment is less expensive because you're not lifting up a gigantic piece of concrete or a slab of concrete. You're only lifting up a panel. You're building it
inside.
Correct. So we have a lot more options. We can build from land or with smaller barges, so we can get into tighter spots. We can have multiple things going on at once. So it's just a phenomenal system that we fell in love with and see the value in and
I have a question.
Yes.
Engineering wise,
Yes.
how does this new system tie into the old seawall of the sanctuary and Mr. Barton's property?
Yes.
And how will that be
So,
handled?
yeah, no problem. So at Mr. Barton's property, the way we would tie into that is we can't physically tie this in just like we couldn't physically tie in a regular concrete wall. What we would do is we would form and pour a really big, robust concrete plug. And a plug meaning it's just a cast in place concrete portion of this. So we would do a return and come into Mr. Barton's wall, tie into the cap, and dowel into the existing wall and strengthen that up. It's hard to know exactly how that's going to be done at the moment on paper. It's one of those items that in the field, as we come in and we see exactly the elevations, how much room we have in between the walls, then we would have the assigned engineer come up with a specific detail, a field detail for that specific tie-in. But that is how it's done.
Can I ask, have you actually installed this elsewhere?
Yes.
Successfully? Absolutely. This isn't the guinea pig.
No. Here's a project that we're on right now.
But as I asked, this is the cutting edge technology at this point in
This
time.
is the best seawall you can buy.
Used by most seawall construction.
It is growing, so more and more contractors are adopting it. Not every seawall contractor uses it as their business model. Some other seawall contractors have their business model to set up as a cap and batter package. So they'd come in and just install new batters and a new cap because they might pour the concrete at their own yard. It's just a different business model. I don't see the value in building. I'm a young guy building a business. I want to be able to come by when, I'm in my 60s and see walls that I built and still be proud of what they look like then. So that's what I'm doing.
The other question I have is with the concern of the melding of your seawall to the adjacent seawall.
Mm-hmm.
And if, as you say, that's something that still is being considered and it hasn't been worked out, I think it's very important that be worked out, because if a neighbor's seawall starts to evidence erosion as a result of this new seawall going in.
Correct.
I think it is a responsibility.
100%.
So I'd like to see a more complete understanding of how these seawalls are going to.
I can explain it maybe a little bit in better depth here. So here's a corner. You have several pieces that turn and get a radius. So say the new wall is, let's use this table. If the new wall is coming, if we're, in front of the wall like this, we come and then we return and dive into this, right? So we get as much Truline as we could right here. And same thing as if we were doing a cast-in-place concrete wall. There's no difference. We'd get that new cast-in-place concrete wall as tight as we could, dowel into it, and we would integrate the casts together. And then we would form and pour this, and you'd have a seam there that is congruent and formed in place. So it's just it is just an extension of this, or an extension of a regular seawall. It is just, instead of using this as the form, you would use a piece of plywood, or we've cut these in half to where we can get it just right, and we form and pour. So you're casting the concrete tie-in in place. There's no difference on whether it's with Truline or just like, on the other end of, it's just.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
But the fact remains that if by some error there is leakage between the two seawalls, and as a result, the neighbor's seawall ends up needing substantial repair.
To be clear, there's not going to be a seam. There won't be a seam. There will not be a gap in between the two walls. That's the gap between the two walls is the only thing that would allow water and sediments to escape to, where you would incur erosion. But if we form and pour and cast in place, like we physically are, just like when you pour a tie beam or pour any type of concrete, when you dowel in and you form up to it and you cast it in place, it is now, it's part of, the two walls are one, if that makes sense. You're gluing it together with concrete. The two walls are now one. And there's no difference between tying in with Truline or the regular standard seawall.
Art, could I ask you a question? I know you actually submit your application as the contractor, maritime contractor, and you submit engineering plans, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Structural engineering plans, and you have the specialty engineering plans.
Yes.
From Truline.
Exactly.
And in fact, Truline has a special
in-house
engineer that works with us and will work with you and does work with you on a regular basis.
Correct.
Project. And then Truline then submits specialty, essentially shop drawings for their materials and for their particular system.
Correct.
To the municipality, and the municipality then evaluates that as it does any other set of plans.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're talking about is nothing out of the ordinary.
No, it happens on every single seawall.
Right.
Every single one.
So this is the normal methodology, and really this is a construction issue.
It's better. So like if this was just regular vinyl with no concrete fill, it would just be a single piece of vinyl touching, and then you form and pour. Whereas this is, you're continuing the concrete, and you're casting the concrete in place. There's no point really of failure there. Let's just say we would build the entire seawall cast in place, because it's a preferred method. Casting is much stronger than building with little blocks, right? So if we're casting it, you are gluing the two things, and you're basically tying them in together permanently.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Morris, I saw you want to make a comment, but can I just ask before that, because the town manager's just indicated he has an input which might affect what you said.
My question is, have you ever constructed a seawall like this in the city of Delray Beach?
Yes.
Okay, so it's gone, you've had to get permits from the city of Delray Beach.
Yes.
So when you say it's kind of in the field, sometimes you may have to make adjustments, or.
I was mostly referring to the elevations, the elevations and the width away. It's going to be, it's already drawn up to what we're speccing out and what we're speculating of exactly what it's going to be. But, in the field, it might be, because.
But as you do those, specifically using going through the Delray Beach building department, do they make regular as you say, build as you go.
Correct.
I mean,
They do.
are there thresholds?
So,
or
The threshold, the
Delray
inspection
Beach?
threshold is, you know, we have the panels delivered, we have our ticket, you know, they're 21-foot panels, you know, the site engineer, if he's required to provide a pile log, will provide a pile log. It's not always required for seawalls, but when we're installing pilings, it is. So there are safeguards in that sense. Also, when the inspections that are related to a seawall are very limited, there's not much that goes into it. So we put the panel in, and then we put our structure of steel in, and then we start forming the cap, and then we'll have the cap formed and the structural steel in place, and they would come out and review that the steel has been placed and tied and overlapped in the correct manner. We also, in this case, we have these helical VSMS anchors, which we actually, I sub that out to a specialty contractor with specialty. They have an in-house engineer that provides a pile log that they log and test each helical anchor to make sure that we meet our 15 kip. And that they provide a pile log. So that is what we would. The engineer would provide the pile log for those, and then we would form and pour it. There would be an in-progress survey that would ensure that where we said we're going to put the wall's there within, you know, construction tolerances.
Okay.
Yep.
But like a conventional seawall.
Yes.
That would go before, you know, go to Delray Beach, this meets the minimum qualifications of the Florida building code.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mrs. Morris, Mrs. Morris did have a
I
hand
was
up
just
first.
curious, could you tell us roughly what the cost per linear foot?
So on average, you know, we're seeing, depending on, there's a lot of variables, right? So,
Just roughly.
$800 to $1,500 a foot. It is. There's just a lot of variables.
So this seawall on Mr. Barton's property is approximately 45 feet. Who's gonna pay for it and who's gonna own it? It's against Mr. Barton's property.
That would probably be a better question
Who will have legal, ownership of that seawall?
It all depends which particular area. If it's on our property, we own it. If it's on their property, they own it. But we have, we're
So
entering.
if stand on it, would be trespassing on Mr. Benjamin's property.
You know, Mr. Barton, I think you can address that.
I think I should talk, because the thing is, my name keeps getting brought up, and I keep to be the other person that's involved with the Benjamins, and it's affecting me. It's not really affecting, I'm sorry, I expect Nick.
Jennifer Morris.
Jennifer Morris. It's not affecting the Morrises, it's affecting me.
No, it is affecting us, that's why we're concerned
What?
about this project.
The wall, as it connects to my wall, is affecting you?
No, it's not.
That's what I'm talking
The
about.
project affects the other.
But I'm not talking about the project. I'm talking about his wall. That's what we're talking about.
We're talking about a lot of things.
Well, you may be talking about a lot of things, but I'm addressing what we're addressing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I just want to say one thing, is that I introduced the Benjamins to Art.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to get him to do my wall in the Truline. Now, my reasons for not doing it in the Truline are different than if I was the Benjamin, I would use the Truline. And the reason why I would use the Truline for the Benjamin is because they have the luxury of they're dealing with taking the earth out and putting it in place properly. What I didn't like about the Truline on my property, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, I just couldn't get comfortable with the fact that they're going to jigger it in through all that mud and slush and get it down to the depth they want. Now, I've seen on the intercoastal where they have done it, and it's successful. I mean, it works. And they tie it into another wall. It might be a batter and cap wall, but they tie it in. I mean, that's construction people do. They basically make it work. And, you know, when I was originally considering it, my wall was only separated about 6 inches, but we had enormous rains last year. And when I contracted to do the batter and pile repair, the wall was still acceptable to do it. But then as it started to move forward and we're in the construction project, I had to do all kinds of additional things that I maybe wouldn't have had to do if I did the Truline. So, you know, in hindsight, I might even have used the Truline even in the mud thing, because I ended up having to put in twice the amount of batters because my wall started moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I also put in web pours too, which is an interesting design that I never thought of it. In order to make the wall even stronger, they actually put in a pour of concrete between the batter that's on a 45-degree angle and the wall. and they do it on a wing basis, which is like something that he might have to address when he addresses the connection between the two, and the fact that his wall might be a little bit in front of my wall, and the tides move in and out. It's probably gonna cause erosion and different problems to that wall, dependent upon whether or not he can deflect the movement of the water. And I just wanna say, the other reason why I didn't wanna do it is that helical piles go into your property by 14 feet. And for the Benjamins, that works out perfectly, as long as they get an easement from the Bartons, because the Bartons' land is going to absorb those helical piles. And that's something that we're working out between the two of us. But I would say that, as far as the question of the structural integrity of this wall and its acceptance, it's out there and it works.
Thank you.
And it looks good too.
Thank you. Any more comments on this area? Yes.
I have a quick side question here. I have a conventional wall on my property, and every 20 or 40 feet, there's what I understand is called like a weep hole.
Yes.
That allows, and I was told that those are there so that water that builds up in the soil, the pressure that builds up, has a way of
relieving itself
rather than pushing against the wall.
Yes.
What provision is made in your system?
So in this system, we don't show it, it actually shows right here. So we have, it's a 2.5-inch ABS jet hole, weep hole. It is a weep hole, and it passes through the panel, and it has a cartridge that can be serviced very easily and cleaned. And we put it about a foot above the growth line or high tide line. And what these weep holes do is they allow your seawall and earth behind it to breathe. So when you have a big rain event, what happens is you build up hydrostatic pressure. All this dirt becomes saturated with water, and it becomes that much heavier, right? So if you have a dump truck that has dry dirt, it's lighter versus a dump truck that has wet dirt. So what we want to do is it doesn't always percolate through the ground quick enough. So what we want to do is we want to put in these weep holes, and that allows the hydrostatic pressure to be relieved. So on traditional seawalls, because not everyone wants to build a new seawall or wants to take on the purchase of a new seawall or sees value in a new seawall, but they have issues behind their seawall. So a service that we offer is, it's called soil stabilization. And we use a poly resin that we inject behind the wall, and it fills the gaps and cracks and seals it up, and it doesn't displace the soil, but it permeates it. So it travels through, just like water, it absorbs it, and then it stiffens it up. And then we come in behind that after that's complete, and we drill in and install a serviceable weep hole. So a lot of people have weep holes that have never been serviced, that have growth that have completely grown inside of it, and they don't work anymore. So we use these stainless steel weep holes that use a larger jet cartridge that can be serviced and changed out much easier. So the whole point of that is to relieve the hydrostatic pressure that builds up. And just so everyone knows, as your tidal event moves, right? If we dig a hole in your backyard, you're going to see the water come up at the same time. But it doesn't come up as fast, and it doesn't go out as fast. So the water on this side can be lower, and this could be higher. So that's where you see, and if you have a high tide event and a large rain event, like Mr. Barton had, that's when we see a lot of older concrete seawalls failing. And that's, again, that's where this system has a big advantage of not relying on concrete to be the only measure of, stability.
Can I ask Mr. Robbins? I'd like to just move on to the landscape information.
No other questions regarding the seawall?
Sorry, I thought you finished. Sorry.
No, I'm done. If anyone else, good to go?
Thank you. Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Art. I learned a lot just now.
Just on the report from the tree expert, he makes reference to 3 specimen trees.
Right.
In the application, it says remove 4 trees.
The third tree, I believe that was, overstatement, the ended up being 3 best increase, but is Mr. Caviezel here? Yeah, he's right here, he can answer your questions.
Thank you. It was just, whether it's a typo, it's just, for the record, in the application it says, remove 4 trees in poor condition and install 2 native trees and 11 native palms, which does raise the question you did say about 8 for every, for every tree lost, 8 are gonna go in.
I believe that's what.
We're going to be keeping a tree that was outside of this work area.
Okay.
We're removing it, now we're keeping it.
So in the application, is it 4 trees to be removed or 3?
I believe it's 3.
376, 77.
Yeah, it's just that it was incongruent with the report.
You're right.
I have a question about the landscaping also. It's too small for me to see on the paper.
You have some more plans here?
No, we can go to the,
Really, it's too bright.
To the town. Do we have, well, which plans here? Rita?
These,
Yes. Why don't you show it?
What was the question?
The trees.
The trees that you're gonna use.
would you like me to tell you, or you would like to see it on the plan?
I have the plan, I just couldn't read what they were.
The trees are pigeon plum, pigeon plum, which is a native tree. Green buttonwood is a native tree. We're using Florida thatch palms, which is a native palm. Royal palms also are native. We have several coconuts going along the new waterfront, just give a tropical look, but you can still see through it. We're using a lot of native shrubs, and it's a variety of planting material to, number one, create a screening from the north side, and then behind the seawall.
That's the part I'm talking about, the north side when you drive down. So that's basically native shrubs, is that what you think?
Yes.
Over at the west entrance, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
That's right.
Yep, and I have a rendering there too, so it gives you a really good understanding of the look. If you'd like to go to that and zoom in even. Do you have this?
It's larger. Here's an 18, 17. We're going to outlet below. Yeah, you got it.
No, I've got another. Yeah. You can be the normal glasses.
There's the rendering there, there's the before and after, and as you can see, in the before, you can see the lawn, that's that bright green, and in the after, the trees, the large shrubs, the few palms completely block any view inside.
Thank you. You're welcome. Is there any more discussions from the floor? Mr. Murphy.
Sure, I'll stay. Thank you. Sure. For some reason, this is not rolling. We could. No, it's not. Would you be able to reboot or whatever? Okay, good, thank you. Nope, there.
it should be in persnickety.
Where do you want to go?
We want to go all the way.
Yeah, you pass it a little bit.
Here's the site plan. Would you like that, or would you like a, we can, why don't you bring it down there, right there?
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, Mr. Roche, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Doherty. I've represented the Bartons, with respect to this project, and I just want to put some things on the record because this has been a very, very intensive, and prolonged, conversation between us. It has not been kumbaya at all times. It's been very adversarial at times, but we've agreed on certain things, and these are the ultimate. Few things left that I want on the record that Ken agreed to with Mr. Smith's, Mr. Benjamin's input, I believe. First of all, and not to belabor this meeting and continue it unnecessarily, there are two fences. One fence goes this way and one fence goes that way. It involves Mr. Smith, who has agreed to repair or replace that fence, but there's another. So Mr. Benjamin agrees that if the other fence is damaged or needs to be replaced, that he is willing to do that. You understand that the helical pilings that you've heard about are in that triangle, which is east of the lower yellow line and then goes south to Mr. Smith's property. So it's that area where the helical piles are going to be driven, and that's what concerns the nearest neighbor, Mr. Barton. So in that regard, Mr. Benjamin has also agreed that the construction manager, whom Mr. Barton knows, of course, will confer with Mr. Barton with respect to where he's putting the pilings and what's going on from time to time. And they'll work well together, and that's something that everyone benefits by. With respect to soil erosion, it's an ongoing responsibility of Mr. Smith and his successors and Mr. Benjamin and his successors with respect to any soil erosion on Mr. Barton's property or his successors being the result of the helical piling.
Or the wall.
And so, or the wall. So that is not just the 12 months from the date construction is finished. It's an ongoing obligation and will survive the construction.
That's correct. If our pilings fail or our wall fails, and as a consequence of that, it deteriorates or causes damage, we will correct it and repair it.
Right.
As far as defining failure is gonna be defined by the fact that the soil is I'm having sinkholes on my side of the wall.
Well,
Those sinkholes,
as long as
the soil is only gonna sink. Yeah. Because of the wall being put in. If there's no wall put in, my soil will stay the way it stayed for the last 50 years. But if the wall is allowing the soil to go underneath, which hopefully it never will.
I'm very confident that the system will
I'm just
alleviate
saying
that
that if I have
100%.
holes in the back because the soil is sunk, it's gonna be because the wall is failing, whether you can see that the wall is failing or not.
Yes.
It is in fact letting the soil go underneath the wall.
And gentlemen, as we said last time, the discussions and the details in the
It's not a
contract,
big deal.
thank you for putting on
But
public
it's something
record.
that
I just want it on the record today, and we'll work.
we have the language in the agreement, and what we're clarifying today is that, of course, language in the agreement survives the construction and survives the temporary easement and is continuous as to.
What legal document,
There's Mr. Doherty, there's a master agreement for exchange of easements.
okay,
The easements control the master agreement, but the master agreement has specific provisions that are not necessarily easement related. And those conditions in the master agreement will survive the construction.
That's correct. And we agree to that, absolutely.
The other thing is that Benjamin Smith have agreed to escrow $20,000 for the purpose of replanting in the area of the triangle that I mentioned to you, to be used exclusively for restoration of plants and vegetation and trees that have to be replaced. If there is other major damage, then that is unexpected, and working with the contractor, then that will be a separate claim we have not covered. And the final thing that Mr. Barton has asked for with respect to the contractor and his insurance and or his bond is that Mr. Barton be named an additional insured, which is no skin off your nose.
For the bond and in the insurance that they seek to get to indemnify me, I'm gonna be a named insured.
And that's it. It's been a long road.
There's one other thing too that was also agreed to. By the way, the helical piles come in here and they go in here, and they go in 14 feet. So it's a question of like whether, I have some significantly tall coconut palms or areca palms that are over 20 feet. And so I just want to ascertain whether or not those helicals are going to disturb the root system. I'll show you here, Tom. The other thing is, this area here was a big point of contention as a separate easement.
Oh, yeah.
That there would be no parking or anchoring of a boat in front of the seawall that is in fact my seawall.
Of course, that is against council.
Yeah, we can't do that, Tom.
Okay, I just wanted it in the easement because it has been a subject of discord between us that I wanted, I mean.
The area that's yellow is your seawall, and we will not
Right.
attempt to.
Park or more, or
Yeah,
anchor a boat in
that's
front of
right.
there.
Excuse me, it is against town code to park any boat along a seawall without a dock, so that is a non-issue.
Okay, so I just wanted to. That's good.
Well,
It's a non-issue, but it doesn't work.
That's a
It's been
non-issue,
addressed.
there will never be a boat dock.
Thank you.
So that has been addressed. Gentlemen, thank you for the record confirming that the parties have agreed with the app before you came here.
It's great that we have it in the records and everything is clear, and I'll have this transcribed. And
Sorry, Mr. Robbins.
I just want to.
Gentlemen, can we have a, gentlemen,
I may have to work with you on them.
excuse me, gentlemen, can we have
So
a
I'm
side
glad
issue?
you're throwing this
Mrs.
up,
Morris.
because I have a handful of questions. So from what I understand, this 45 approximately wall, at $1,500 is about $68,000 worth of construction. So I'm assuming, from what I'm hearing, that Mr. Benjamin is gonna pay for it. And I'm also assuming from something I've heard that Mr. Benjamin is going to own it. So even though it's against Mr. Barton's property, it's technically owned by Mr. Benjamin. Therefore, if Mr. Barton stood on it, he'd be trespassing.
We have a separate agreement.
Okay.
But can I just
Your
say,
agreement allows us to walk along.
excuse me, just specific to this site, if the parties have agreed that it's their property, yeah.
I understand. Also, I understand also that Mr. Smith is going to be paying for his own construction of seawall in the carve-out, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's about $165,000 worth of wall. If he were to go straight across and not do this odd carve-out, it'd only be 50 feet of wall at $75,000, and he could have a dock there, but obviously then, Mr. Benjamin couldn't do sort of what he wants to do, but he could go more this way. So this is a lot of money for,
Well,
I don't know what.
forgive me, it's not on his, it's on Benjamin's. What you're proposing doesn't allow Tom to get access to the water. The reason why the indentation is because he's got to come almost 10 feet before he gets on the
Oh,
Smith
because
property.
it's
That's what that line is there for.
What is the purpose of this job?
So, because they're looking for 100 feet, it's only an 80-foot canal.
Yeah, but why not go straight?
This has nothing to do with the
Well, it
application.
does, because I'm contending that this property is not, this needs to be surveyed. Why is this job here? What is the purpose of it?
We have a deed, we have provided a boundary survey, and that is the design we're building, and that's what we prefer.
So are you proposing then that this fence line of the sanctuary is the property line? And are you off of that because that's the property line of the sanctuary? There has to be a reason why you did that. It'd be
Doing what?
cheaper, you have this job. Why not just go straight?
That's design.
Is this what you're contending is the legal property line between the sanctuary and London
I
Mill?
cannot make that representation.
Well, that,
I'm
we
under
need
oath.
a survey, because
I'm
the
under-
only thing that's showing, there's a southwest marker here and a concrete document, surveyor block. The only one on the property, I looked up, and I found through a surveyor, old document. This shows a plat line as a legal property line. The only one that does, it connects with the 10-foot easement that runs along South Haven Harbor. So we contend that this land belongs to the sanctuary, and that's why we need a survey.
Which we have discussed
Previously, we provided our survey. If there's somebody who wants to raise it, they can hire a surveyor and do what they want to do if they legally do it. But this has been discussed, and the issues involving my client's interests along the way, along the other side of, on the north side of the bird sanctuary has been fully discussed with council, with the town, and all those issues have been resolved. If there's something that Ms. Morris believes is there, then we haven't seen any evidence of it.
The town has admitted they do not have a
Sorry, Mrs.
survey
Morris,
of the
can you
bird
let Mr.
sanctuary.
Robbins finish, please? Mr. Robbins.
So if somebody has substantial, competent evidence, which is the standard for this board, then it should be considered, but just speculation is just not correct and should not even be considered by this board. Well, this project is a matter of right. The code does not prohibit it. And the Florida Constitution and the laws of Florida provide that we have the right to utilize our property the way we wish to.
And I think
As a consequence, we're proceeding with this, and we proceeded with good faith, and we have worked with and spoken to everybody along our waterway. We've spoken, and we have bent over backwards at tremendous cost to put the entryway on to the east side, which is going to destroy our courtyard, destroy the formality of the quiescence that we have to protect a possible view by a neighbor. But they made an objection, and we agreed to do that, to be a good neighbor. We've done everything we can. We've been delayed by this project, and I understand the concerns. I'm not belittling the fact that they have concerns. They're genuine. But we've addressed every single one fairly and equitably. And this project should be approved, sent to the commission. If you want to impose conditions, I'd love to discuss them with you, and we can go through those conditions at this time. I'd ask for a motion to approve this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. And just following on from that, I'd like to make a comment that the presentation you made today was magnitudes better than the previous. It hit all the points that we asked you to address. And we recognise the fact that this was to considerable good faith and effort. Because at the last meeting, it wasn't up to the standard we expected, and that was raised by the public as well. So thank you for presenting it in that form. On that request, to move forward, is there any more discussion? Because that, we have to make a recommendation to the commission. This is a level 3 in one part, and we do have the level 2 for the landscape. Is there any more discussion from the board?
One comment is that I think they went above and beyond to address all the issues, and I think it's everything it should be.
And there will be further discussion at the commission meeting, because we make a recommendation, but the quality of what you presented, especially addressing those 5 key points that we had from the previous meeting, you've addressed every single one. So with that in mind, could I?
And the town legal counsel is happy with the northern part of that issue?
With respect to the,
Yeah, with respect to Mrs. Morris's,
The bird sanctuary.
yeah, the bird sanctuary.
yes, we have our engineer has a surveying department or what have you. I'm going to reach out to them and get a survey conducted as soon as possible, so we can confirm that, everything that has been discussed today relative to the bird sanctuary boundaries.
Would that need to be put into a motion?
We don't need to. We can bring that up at the town commission. Just depends. I don't know if we'll have the ability to get a survey conducted ahead of time, but that's something that we'll work out in advance of the meeting. That can be in the manager's report as far as maybe a potential condition moving forward.
Okay, does that address your point?
If I may, this also assumes that the DEP is going to approve the dredging of the canal, which should be before they do the digging of the marina. So pushing this along until the DEP approval comes forth is a waste of time until that happens.
We are not, dredging is not part of this application.
That's a risk that they're willing to take, that the DEP turn around and say, no, but this is taken as a discrete application.
That's correct. It's not dependent on getting dredging, though we expect we have a right to dredge, but that's another issue.
And that's not the.
You know, navigable, these are navigable waters, and there's
And that is
a
not.
lot of case law on that issue, which we
that's not
don't
the
need to go
remit of
into
this
now.
board. Yeah. Right, okay. Thank you. Mrs. Morris? No? Okay.
I'm Skip Martin, Kidden Harbor. I'm not certain whether this is the appropriate time to bring this up, based on what this board votes on it. But if you are to proceed along with an okay on this, at some point, I think there are a couple provisions that neighbors would like to see put on this. At the previous meeting, we expressed concern that although at the present time, Mr. Benjamin's boat is a beautiful, low-profile boat, we're concerned that a subsequent owner or even Mr. Benjamin could potentially come in at some future date with a sport fisherman with a 45-foot tuna tower with lights on it that, if turned on in the evening, it would be quite noticeable throughout the neighborhood. I know the Morrises have a boat that would fit into this project. I think it's a 90-foot boat. And the height of their boat is 45 feet. So it's not unreasonable to be concerned that at some future date, quite a tall boat would be in there that would be viewed quite differently than Mr. Benjamin's present boat. So I'm not sure if you can put any kind of a limit as to the height of a boat that might go in there, as to how many lights can go into that marina area, as to what hours the lights are allowed to be on, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a concern of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Robert?
I can assure you that we will not cause lights to shine directly at our neighbor's property. And we would respect our neighbor's property. Of course, we might have lights.
Yeah.
We have lights.
Could I take some?
We have lights internal in the boat, they may be on, the cabin lights might be on. The Benjamins are conservative people. You know, they're gonna act in the norms. Anybody can put lights on anybody's property and be obnoxious, but there are limitations. I believe probably the code has some restrictions, so I don't know this town's code, but most towns do not allow people to shine lights from their property onto other property, and, you know, we're gonna respect that.
Can I just qualify that from the town? Is there anything in the code that specifically says in reference to light?
There are regulations regarding to the lights you are permitted to have on your dock, and there are also provisions regarding a docking zone, that you cannot have the size of your boat that's permitted is relative to the water frontage that you have.
Right.
So the code has these built-in protections for those, the size and the light issues.
Okay, thank you. That addresses your point, Mr. Martin.
Well, I'm not so sure that it addresses the height.
That's a separate
Somebody
one.
coming with a
Okay,
sport
it's
fisherman.
the height, yeah. So
Tuna
the light part is addressed, it's the height issue.
Because this project goes way up into the yard, it's hard to tell from this drawing. But as far as the DEP permitting, clearly this project cannot go forward until those permits have been attained, is that correct?
I have to ask Mr. Stoddard that issue.
So you would dig this hole, create this hole, and if you can't get your
Mr.
dredging
Stoddard
permit.
will respond to you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, there's no building permit can be issued until all the permits are secured from FDEP. So there's not going to be an excavation, there's not going to be any construction until the FDEP permits have been issued.
Okay, so they can't even start digging until they get the DEP permit.
The town of Gulfstream is not going to issue a building permit.
Okay, so as far as navigable waterways, I did a little research. I spoke to a very knowledgeable, real estate broker who specializes in waterfront properties in Florida. I also spoke to a local surveyor and another real estate agent. There's two ways you can dredge waterways in Florida. Maybe this is also all the United States, but this is a man-made canal. The land under that water belongs to Mr. Barton and the other property owners plus the sanctuary. So all 6 of those lots, I think it's 6, 5 property owners have to agree to the DEP permit to dredge. Just because you want to doesn't mean you can, because it's a man-made canal. Riparian regs refer to natural waterways like the Port of Miami or the Lake Okeechobee, and they are managed by the state government of Florida. And Florida was deeded, I think, a state in 1845. So those are the two differences with dredging. That's the only difference. So you cannot get that permit unless you have the permission from the property owners. Just because you want to, that's not how it works.
I'm sure they'll address that. So, with that, can I ask for a motion, and that's not straightforward, well, it is presented, could I ask for a motion from the board, read our recommendation to the Town Commission? Let's see.
Okay, where are we?
I'll make a motion. On application 21.5, I make a motion to recommend approval of the demolition permit and a level 3 architectural site plan based on the finding that the construction of a new bulkhead landward of the existing bulkhead, the construction of 2 docks and a boat lift, and the construction of new site walls to retain existing grades, meet minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Please.
Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
I'll make a motion on application 21-6. Motion to approve a land clearing permit based on a finding that the land clearing permit to remove 4 trees in poor condition and to install, it's 3, I'd like to make a motion to approve a land clearing permit based on the finding that the land clearing permit to remove 3 trees in poor condition and to install 2 native trees and 11 native palms as replacement trees meets the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Rita?
Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
And with that?
There's another motion.
There's one more, sorry.
I'm sorry, last motion, I'd like to make a motion to approve a level 2 architectural site plan review to permit landscaping improvements as per the detailed drawing based on a finding that the landscaping improvements meet the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards with the following condition. 1, any minor modifications to the approved landscaping shall be submitted to the town manager for review and approval, and any major modifications shall be brought back to the ARPB for review and approval before commencement of landscaping.
Second.
Rita?
Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Vice Chair Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, I'd like to hand back the chair to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your time and your patience.
Thank you.
Cases run out.
Could you, if you want to have a discussion, you can please take it out in the foyer. Thank you, Malcolm, for standing in for me. Are there any items by staff that need to be brought forward at this time?
Yes, sir, I do want to just talk about the correspondence that I've had with each one of you individually relative to our building design bill. We've been working very closely with our contacts in Tallahassee with the Florida League of Cities to get some amendment language on there. The way that things are going, the Senate bill got tied up, so the buddy of the senator who sponsored that got it tacked onto a different bill that was going through committee. So we had an existing bill that sort of just now contains the building design amendments and language that we were so opposed to. Fortunately, that bill sponsor added an exemption for design review boards, which you are a design review board. That was something that I worked very closely with the league to get that on our behalf and some other cities. So our lead contact drafted that language, and I said, absolutely, run with that, push it as hard as you can. So we did get that. So that is now in the Senate bill. The House bill is a little bit different. They have amended the bill as of yesterday to include language that talks about design review boards, but only as it relates to structures that have already been reviewed by the design review board. That would save everything we've looked at already, but it wouldn't save any buildings in the future. So we're trying to figure out how those two bills are going to come out in the wash, both get passed, reconciled. The session ends a week from Friday, so they have to do it very quickly. Ideally, we would get this put to bed this session. We would have that building design preemption that saves us, and we wouldn't have to deal with it next year, because typically they'll be back the next year and they'll try to push it and they'll find new senators and representatives to do that.
Excuse me, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you. So that's been a very positive, generally, outcome from that legislation in this session. Alternatively, as Greg and myself and some others have been working on, Rita and our planner, some other ways to deal with the exemptions that were contained in the earlier version of the bill, and that would be to create historic districts in town. I know that we've kind of been opposed to that in the past. These historic districts would just be for architectural style. It would not landmark any existing building. It would not prevent anyone from tearing down the existing structure. It would just be to designate the historic core, beachfront, and part of the Ocean West districts that have that design. I guess what I'm looking for, our current district language already in the code through the design manual. So we would just amend a very, very easy amendment that would establish that based on the studies that have already been done back in the mid-90s, and that would be an exemption. So we would have complete ability for you as the ARPB to continue to exist and review houses in the core, in the Ocean West, up here on A1A, and the beachfront. So we maintain those individual zoning districts. Another way that we're looking at dealing with it, again, in the event that we get legislation that passes that does preempt us and doesn't let us regulate building design, would be incentive zoning through our floor area ratio. So we would be looking at sort of opening up the code. You can build a modern house or whatever kind of architectural style you want, but you get less floor area ratio. So we would essentially say build whatever you want. Instead of your 0.33 percentage for the first 20,000 square feet, it might be 0.25 or it might be 0.28 or something like that. To set a baseline. And then if you built a Spanish Mediterranean or a Gulf Stream Bermuda or something that has all the design standards within our design manual, then you could take advantage. Instead of having 0.25 or 0.28, you would get the full 0.33. With the idea that when you buy a property in the core, really anywhere in town, you're really wanting to maximize your floor area ratio. Rita kind of joked that it's been a very long time since you've seen an applicant not getting the maximum floor area ratio that they're permitted. So that would be sort of an incentive to say, you can absolutely have your maximum floor area ratio, but you need to build, to do that, you need to build a Gulf Stream Bermuda, Spanish Mediterranean, something that is in keeping with their design standards. So just to update you, I appreciate the extent that you guys, everyone was able to circulate that and maybe reach out to to some of the senators. I really appreciate that. I think I've gone significantly over time. I really appreciate everyone. And your work on that. It looks like we will be okay, and we will still have our ARPB, for next year.
Darn.
So one way or the other, we will, we have addressed that, whether in Tallahassee or at the local level, we'll be able to manage that. So that's my update.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Is there anything, any items by anybody on the
Yeah, so
board?
just a quick one. What have we got next month in May, Rita?
Well, nothing definite, but, there's a new house that's, supposedly on the drawing board. But I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
There's a possibility that, the old, Dye House, where we approved the landscape plan, may be coming in to request, revision to what we approved.
Okay. I see they haven't done anything, they haven't started anything. It's just as it was a month ago, right?
Yes.
But I thought if it was a minor I take it it's not a minor
No,
modification.
it's not.
Good. We have public here. Does the public have any comments?
Thanks for that work on the ARPB.
It's our competitor from the north.
The north competitor.
Okay, I think we're adjourned. Thank you. Not a competitor, I didn't, sorry. Our friendly neighbors in the north.
There you go, I like that better. Oh, great.